What's up, my luscious little fruit salads? This is Rob from Gay Guy Plays, and today on #confirmed, we're digging into Primetime 266 to get our first look at Update 26. Now, there was so much information in this Primetime, legitimately, it was absolutely luscious. Like, my words per minute were being tested, like my fingers were flying left, right, and center because they had so much information to share. Now, with that, I am going to say that this is the first part of the coverage on this specific Primetime because it was broken up conveniently into two pieces. First one is the part that Megan covered, which is all of the things that have changed since the last time you've heard about them. So any kind of tweaks that they've made to abilities during the reworks, any things with weapons and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of great information there. And then Rebecca is going to get the second half, which is going to come out in a separate video, which is going to talk about all of the new additions. So definitely stay tuned for that. Rebecca just DM'd me, but we gotta keep going with the video because there's a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and jump on into the very first topic of the things that have changed. So the first one is, of course, the inbox gift and melee alerts. Now, in the previous time that they've talked about this inbox gift, basically what it's going to be is like a care package to help you ease into Update 26. Because as you know, we've got Ember and Vauban undergoing some major changes, and we have a lot of things going on with the melee system. So they are going to be giving out 3 forma as well as a 7-day affinity booster. In addition to that, you will be getting a legendary core. Now, previous to this, they said that it was going to be just for 7 days and they might extend it a little bit. So I was thinking maybe 2 weeks. No, bitch! They're stretching this out till December 31st. So you've got some time. As long as you log in between now and December 31st, that is a guaranteed legendary core. So huzzah, be happy. I do have to say I'm slightly disappointed at the fact that this doesn't scale with as many, weapons as you formud or how many formud you put into specific warframes that they've made changes to. I don't know. I thought that would have been a nice touch to, gift your loyal veterans and dedicated players that have put the time and effort into the game. But you know what? I'll take what I can get. The other thing that they also wanted to go ahead and address is melee-only alerts. Now, this is really, really cool. So what they're going to be doing after the update launches is basically they're going to launch these alerts where you can only use your melee weapon. They really want you to kind of sink your teeth into Melee 3.0, get a feel for the combo system, get a feel for like all of the new heavy attacks and whatnot, and each of these alerts will grant you a fully built forma. So listen, I'm gonna take a win where I can take a win, right? Moving along, we have post-melee workshop changes. So they actually addressed a couple different things to this. They went over exalted weapons, as well as some things that they've done to some mods and some melee weapons that they featured on stream. So let's go ahead and kick things off with Exalted Melee. We have Garuda's Talon. So the stat breakdown to this is the parrying angle is 60. So for those of you guys who don't remember, it's kind of like the slice of pie that projects out in front of you as you're meleeing. You can now fully equip your melee weapons, not just quick melee, but like fully equip them. And when you equip them, you actually block 100% of the damage. And in this case, it's 60% of an angle to block in front of you. So that's the parrying angle, and that's actually the same parrying angle for all of the exalted weapons. The range has increased from 1 to 2.2. So as you guys know, our range mods are going to change a little bit. I believe that it's just going to be a flat boost instead of a percentage boost. So they are giving our range to the melee weapons and making it a little bit more. So instead of 1, it's 2.2 now, and the damage has increased from 72 to 180, which is absolutely fantastic. Baruch's Desert Storm. Now, the parrying angle, again, is 60. The range increase, this one was weird to me because he has projectiles, and I'm like, I don't know if I actually, punch anything in the face, but, But it went from 1 to 1.2. Not that it really matters. Excalibur's Exalted Blade, the parrying angle again is 60. The range went from 1 to 2.8, so you get a little bit more when you're actually contacting with your sword. The, damage was increased from a measly little 35 all the way up to 200. Yes, that is actually pretty fucking fantastic. And they said for some reason heavy attacks were added, which to me is a little bit strange. I mean, I just assumed that they were always there. Valkyr's Claws. Now, this one is an interesting change that they definitely highlighted. Parrying angle, again, is 60. The range increase went from 0.5 That's how much these poor claw weapons had on range, 0.5 to 1.7. So it's still not massive, but you do get a little bit more leeway. Now, here's the thing. As many Valkyrie players know, when you have the claws on and you zoom in and you kind of like aim down sights a little bit, you actually lose your invulnerability. So what they've done now is if you fully equip on your claws, aka your melee only, there is no like, you know, quick swapping over to your weapon, what's going to end up happening is you just retain your invulnerability the entire time. So that's fantastic for those people who just want to go claw mode on Valkyrie. It is back, so huzzah! Now, speaking of that, so we're going to move on to mods and other things along that sort. They did really want to put out to you guys that they are not touching melee riven dispositions until afterwards. They wanted to kind of see how everything flowed with us and how everything kind of worked, and then they would go ahead and be deciding as to where the tweaks needed to be. So just be aware of that. They also wanted to say that the Riven challenges that have anything to do with channeling, it's now going to reflect on combo counter instead. So it'll all shift over. They're making it as seamless as possible. Now, interestingly enough, abilities that use the combo counter will scale at a 25% damage increase due to the ease of building the counter. This is under review, so they might increase it, they might decrease it, they might get rid of it, they might, I don't know, do a ton of different things to it. But basically, this kind of applies for Ashe. It applies for things like, cat lady, what is it? I want to call her Venari, you know, the girl, the frame that comes with Venari and Atlas. So all of the melee combo counters that kind of like affect that stuff, it is going to be reduced. So we'll see what happens with that. Moving along. This one was actually a really, really good question. I did not even think about this, but for everybody who's bought Prime Armor, and some of these Prime Armors have really, really cool effects to them that are tied specifically to channeling. So anybody who's wondering what's going to happen with that, once you get your combo counter to 2 times, your primed armor effects are going to pop off. And so I'm kind of excited about that. I'm like, okay, that's not bad. That's a nice little touch. Now, we're going to get into some mods, because I know modding is one of the biggest things when it comes to melee. We have condition overload being a super duper hot topic. Now, they didn't give us percentages before, but they've decided on some percentages. Right now, I believe condition overload is at 60% per status that's affecting the enemy. Now it is 120! They've doubled the base damage that you're ending up getting per stack, but they are capping it at 3. I personally feel like that's fair. Of course, I don't know how that's going to kind of like stack up when it comes to the rest of the melee system. So I'm going to reserve judgment for that. But to me, it sounds pretty freaking fair. Let me know how you guys feel about that one down in the comments below, because I know that that's a bit of a hot topic. Now, covert lethality. They were talking about moving that to the parasoxamol. I don't remember what it's called. The stabby, the data spike. We'll leave it at that. Rob can't remember words right now. There's a lot going through his head. But yeah, that one was supposed to just be a mod for that thing, but they've decided it's going to remain a dagger mod for now. So it is also going to provide 16 initial combo, which I'm still trying to get clarification on. Like, I've messaged a couple people on DE staff and I'm like, yo, what does this mean? But they said plus 16 initial combo. Does that go away when you like use it and then it builds back up? Or like, is it there forever? Like, you're just gonna have 16? I'm thinking. Anyway, that's also going to provide 100% finisher damage, and it is also going to be under review. So don't get too used to having it, but it does exist right now. Moving along, we have Killing Blow. So this is going to decrease wind-up time on heavy attacks, as well as provide that heavy attack damage boost. They also have True Punishment in there. It adds 40% critical chance and will reduce the chance to add to the combo counter by 10%. So those are it for the mods that they wanted to go ahead and give us clarification on. Now, they actually wanted to touch on some sideways things, which I find to be very, very interesting. Zeneric has an ability in its tree that used to affect channeling efficiency. Now it's going to affect combo efficiency. Now, from my understanding, what they were talking about when they said combo efficiency on stream is basically whenever you use a what do you call this? Whenever you use a slam attack, you know, the ones that end up, or the heavy attacks that are going to end up using your combo counter, it'll actually give you a little bit back. You're not going to be completely drained of it as long as you have some combo efficiency, which is nice. Moving along, we have some interesting things with the Cyanoid Helicore, Furax Wraith, and Fragor Prime. All of these weapons have bonuses to their channeling damage. So clearly that has to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. Again, it is bonus initial combo counts to offset boosted channeling damage. Pokemon. Sorry, that's what Rebecca messaged me. I was like, what? Okay. Exodia Triumph Arcane has a 50% chance to increase combo counter on hit. So now we're getting into the Exodias, which I think is kind of interesting to kind of like boost up the combo hit counter. And then we've got Exodia Valor. This is a 200% chance to increase combo count when hitting lifted enemies. So you guys remember when you do the slam attack with the heavy attack, it'll end up having this like patch on the ground, which ends up lifting enemies, very similar to one of Baruch's lifting attacks. So whenever you hit those enemies, you're going to get 200% combo counter. Now, Exodia Brave, this one is the sexiest out of all of them. And I was like, do I have a full set of that? Maybe I need to get a full set of that. And it is plus 5 energy regen when killing an enemy with a heavy attack, and it can stack up to 3 times. So I'm like, this might be juicy for anybody who like maybe doesn't have things like Arcane Energize or doesn't want to be forced into using Xeneric all the time. This might be an interesting way to kind of like weave it in to your current melee spec. All right, now the next part, Catchmoon is getting a nerf. Pablo, I've made the notes that I have is Pablo is gonna murder it, and then he posted up a little picture of himself saying, "You can't be mad at me," but Pablo is murdering your Catchmoon. Just to put a name to face, putting that out there. So basically, what's going to happen is they decrease the fall off damage from 100 to a measly 10. So the 10 is very, very low. That's a pretty big drop. They also decrease the range from they decreased the range. It went from 40 down to 20. So it's very, very short range now. Well, I won't say it's very short range. It's pretty short range. And then the fall off actually begins at 8 meters, and then it's full blown at 16 meters. So just a little bit of a heads up for anybody who is a heavy Catchmoon user, which apparently like 50% of Mastery Rank 27s are just running with that Catchmoon. I'm like, I don't know, I hate it, but apparently 50% of y'all love it. Moving along, they actually went ahead and showed off some stats for different melee weapons. Y'all, we're only like halfway through. So the Paracesis base damage, and the Paracesis actually got a pretty good buff. I'm like, wow, I would get into this. It went from 144 up to 222 of its base damage. The range increased from 1.45 to 2.9. Now, as you guys know, the Paracesis has a good amount of crit, but my big complaint with it is that its status chance was kind of poopy. Its status chance actually went from 15 to 22%. And I'm like, that's kind of respectable. I could get into that. Oh, wait, yeah, so 22%, perfect. Now, moving on, the Glaive Prime got a little bit of an increase in there as well. And you guys know Glaive Prime is one of my babies. Its base damage went from 50 to 164. They were not playing when they said that they're going to make melee do a lot more damage. I'm kind of impressed on that. The range was 0.5, and now it's going up to 1.25. And the crits went from 15 all the way up to 22. So I'm like, okay, I'm liking this. Now, they did want to make mention of, I'll save that for after the Zenistar, because I know you guys are curious. Now, when they talked about the Zenistar as a mechanic, they were not 100% sure exactly what was happening with it. Now, as you can see, clearly there's a lot of information that they are kind of like being buried in right now, so you can't fault them, but we'll wait for answers when they can give it. The mechanic still up in the air. I'm gonna assume that they're gonna keep it because it's a very unique mechanic. So they increased the base damage from 130 heat, and they swapped it over. They changed its IPS to 80 impact, 50 slash, and then 150 heat. So for all of the condition overload loving players out there, It's there for you. It's there. The range went from 1 up to 2.6, and then the status chance jumped from 25 up to 30, and the critical went from 5% to 10%. So all in all, when we're taking a look at some of these examples at boosts to melee weapons, I'm happy. Now, of course, I have to see how it all plays in the game and how everything looks in the grand scheme of things, but looks good to me. I'm into it. So let's go ahead and move on to the changes to Warframes. So Ember actually got a really, really cool change that I liked. So Fireball now has a casting combo window. So it's very similar to how Atlas has that landslide, where he like slides in and then you see that one where he can recast it real quick. He'll get more of a damage boost to it. They said that what actually happens is your combo window is affected by duration mods. So what happens is, as long as you keep casting Fireball, the damage is going to increase and increase and increase and increase. And Megan says she was getting some good numbers off of it. Now, I'm always skeptical when they say that, because I'm like, on what? On infested, on heavily armored targets, like give me some more info on the target and the level, okay? But she said that she was happy with it, and of course, for a first ability, that's not half bad. Now, they didn't say anything about, at least from what I remember, they didn't say anything about it reducing the energy cost every time you cast it, you know, like is done with some other abilities, but that would definitely be a nice addition if it's not already there. Next up, we're talking about Immolation. So for those of you guys who don't remember Immolation, it's that armor that Ember gets, and it slowly builds up damage resistance over time as she uses her abilities, and as time goes on. So basically what happens with Immolation is, like I was saying, it slowly builds up its damage base over time, and you can speed up the build by using Fireball or Inferno. We'll get to that in a little bit. But basically, you can go ahead and increase it all the way up until she goes into Overheat mode. Now, previous to this, when we were talking about Overheat, the old incarnation of it was basically once you hit Overheat, your Immolation would explode, expend all of your energy, and deal massive damage to enemies around you. Now, of course, that left Ember a little bit defenseless. So they decided to go ahead and change that a little bit. So again, the higher the gauge on her Immolation gauge, basically what ends up happening, she gets more damage resistance. But once you hit Overheat, it will no longer expire and deal the AoE, but instead it starts consuming energy per second. And the longer that you keep it in Overheat, it will consume more and more and more energy per second. So the way that you can use that is just use Fire Blast to kind of like expend all of that heat and kind of start back up. Now, what they also said is if you didn't want to use Fire Blast to like maybe knock enemies away, you can just toggle it off. And what ends up happening is basically you just start from scratch again. Now, as a reminder, Immolation only has a base casting cost. It does not consume energy. And one of the things that they wanted to say is it will only start consuming energy once you're in Overheat mode. But what that means is, at least from the last time that Rebecca checked, that's what she said, is that you could regenerate energy while you're not in Overheat mode. So for anybody who is curious out there, but once you get in Overheat mode and energy starts being drained from you, you're not going to be able to regenerate it like you would be able with other things. So definitely keep that in mind for your builds and any other synergies you are trying to put in play. But just very freaking glad that literally you're not going to lose all of your energy anymore. Now, let's go ahead and move into, well, Fire Blast is basically the same. There's really nothing crazy about it. But we'll move on to her ultimate, which is no longer called World on Fire. Now, for everybody out there who I always talk about having a veteran story about, this is a veteran story. Remember the days when Ember had an ability called World on Fire? Well, now you can go ahead and count that in as a thing on your veteran story list. Her fourth ability is now called Inferno, and it costs energy per target inside at a maximum of 10. So that's the maximum amount of enemies that you can hit with Inferno at once. If there are more than 10 enemies on the screen, you're just going to have to go ahead and recast. Now, do keep in mind that Inferno doesn't just deal the damage, it actually sets these targets on fire, and that fire will spread. So you probably don't have to necessarily do a lot of recasts on it, and it's probably not a good thing for you to do because it'll build up your Immolation meter a little too quickly. But do keep that in mind, and of course, it'll gauge how much energy to use based on how many enemies are in sight. Now, let's get into these hot dang augment changes for Ember because, wow, they're actually really freaking good. So, first and foremost, we have Immolated Radiance. Allies within affinity range will receive 50% of Immolation's damage redux. And everybody in chat was like, we are running for Immolated Radiance Embers. Just have crazy amount of damage reductions. Just bringing that into endgame. And I was like, yeah, that's actually pretty freaking good because it teams up really well with her next ability called Cauterizing Blast. So that's the Fire Blast augment. Each enemy hit heals Ember by 25 to 50. I'm like, is Tank Ember gonna be the new meta? Are we gonna have a new fire meta tank? I mean, she can strip armor off of enemies. Like, what's happening here? And this one is crazy. So, for Inferno, they have Exothermic. Enemies killed by Inferno have a 15% chance to drop an energy orb. Yo. Ember's about to be really good. Ember's about to be really, really good. Now, there are a couple things that I wanted to add on to that. They did also address her passive, which is, you know, it's called Spicy in our heads, but it's not called Spicy in game. It will stretch out to affinity range, which is 50 meters, and it will increase for 5% power strength for every enemy that is currently ablaze. Now, speaking of being ablaze, they did say on stream that Heat Armor Strip is only active while the heat proc is active. So unlike Corrosive, where you basically just strip the armor off permanently, the fire one is only active while the armor is currently on fire, which I guess kind of makes sense because you like melt it and you compromise its like structural integrity, and then after it kind of like cools down, it solidifies again. I don't know how metals work. Now let's go ahead and have a little bit of a garbage interlude. Yeah, that's rip. Garbage is still garbage. Moving along to Vauban. There was really not many big changes on him aside from some names and his augments, so let's go over those real quick. Tesla is no longer Tesla. It's called Tesla Nervos. Mine Layer now has a full-fledged batch of new names, which is Tether Coil, Flechette Orb, Vector Pad, and Overdriver. To be honest with you, I'm actually really, really excited for Overdriver, which of course is the damage buff that you're able to place on yourself and allies, and it's an aura as well. So part of me is like, this looking kind of good. I'm kind of into it. Now, the Orbital Strike has now had its name changed to Photon Strike, which is different. And then, of course, we still have Bastille, which is Bastille. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the augments that we've got. So first one is called Tesla Bank. While a target has a Nervos attached, any damage is channeled into an 8-meter burst of electricity upon expiration. So I don't really know what they mean upon expiration. Is it like when the target dies, or is it when the Tesla expires? Like, I need a little bit more clarification on that. And then the other augment that we have is Photon Repeater. If it hits 5 enemies, so Photon, what is it called? Strike. If it hits 5 enemies, the next cast of Photon Strike costs nothing. I'm into this. You can just toss on Photon Strike upon Photon Strike upon Photon Strike if your enemies are just, like, not dead. And I really, really like that. I do need to mention that Repelling Bastille hasn't changed. It's still an augment. And then the fire one for Ember's Fireball hasn't changed at all either. So, that about does it for the big changes. They also wanted to address one last change, which is the Zealoid Prelate boss fight. What's going to end up happening with this is you can go into the market and you can pick up a blueprint for the key, and that's going to be for the Derelict. So you can construct a Derelict key for the Prelate boss fight, which is kind of cool. Now the Derelict's got a boss. So that is going to be it for this round. As you can tell, it was a hefty amount of information, and we're only half of the way through. So I'm going to go ahead and get to work on the other half of this. As always, let me know how you guys feel about all of these things down in the comments below. What is really catching your eye right now? Are you liking the changes that they made to Ember's Immolation? Are you excited about the weapons because things are sounding kind of good? Maybe you need to get your hands on some of those Arcanes. I'm just saying. I told y'all to go down to see this and make sure you got your Exodius, so get your Exodius today. Alright, so that's gonna do it for me for now, and as always, love somebody, hurt nobody, and touch your body. I gotta get to work. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!